Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into it. All right, yeah, Tennessee added a power forward today, and Rick Barnes has been busy in the portal. Also, the downside of the NCAA settlement, it's being discussed today. The judge will be making not necessarily a decision today. However, the hearing is today. We might hear about it later. I'm going to talk to you about that, and we'll go through all the details. I'm going to talk to you about what could happen that could be a real negative for a lot of players out there. I mean, a bunch. So let's get into Tennessee basketball for a moment, talk about this new commitment. All right, yeah, Jaylen Carey, this is a guy that played for Vanderbilt. This will be his third year coming up. He played at another school prior to Vanderbilt. And this is a big dude. He's 6'8", goes about 265. And he averaged 8 points, 5.7 rebounds in 33 games. 9.5 points and 6 rebounds in SEC play, so that's important to remember. He improved throughout the year. He had his best games against Tennessee, scoring 14 and 18 points. So obviously Rick Barnes got a big dose of that and went, okay, if you can't beat him, join him. So brought him onto the team. And of course he joins JAKOBI, GILLESPIE, who was the big-time guard they got out of Maryland. He's scoring about 15 points a game and shoots about 40% from the three-pointer. So these are two real nice pickups in the transfer portal. I'll show you the stats on them. And that's right here. GILLESPIE was a 97 ranking, almost a 5-star in the portal. And then Carey's a good solid 4-star. And really what he's there to be is an enforcer and a rebounder. I think that's primarily what his goal will be. And somewhat a scorer. I mean, he scored, 9 points a game. So he's improving throughout his time in college. Now, he is not a three-point shooter. He shoots less than 30%. So don't look for him to stretch as a stretch four. And the only red flag with him is his free throw shooting. I went into the stats and I'll show you that. And that's right here. He shoots 56.8% from the free throw line. That's a problem. The year before he was at 51, so at least he's improving. However, that is a problem at the end of the game. If a guy's shooting between 50 and 60%, you really can't have him in there on the offensive side of the ball anyway in the last few minutes, because they're going to foul him every time and put him on the line, especially if it's a one-on-one situation. So that is the one negative, and that's not uncommon for a big guy. You know, little guys all shoot their free throws well. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in college. Whereas big guys get in there because they're great rebounders, and look, size is a talent in basketball and football. So that was really the only negative I could see there. But again, he is improving that. If he can get up to around 60, 65%, that'll be less of a detriment. And Tennessee's got a long way to go in the transfer portal to fill their roster. They've only got 3 recruits, and we're getting away from recruiting and more towards portal these days. They got 2 4-stars, Amari Evans, Dwayne Brown, a shooting guard, and then a center. They're both top 100 guys. And then Troy Henderson, who comes in at number 232, and you can see again the portal. So it'll be those 5 guys plus, of course, the remaining players, which is Phillips, who you saw a lot this year. Not a big guy, but a pretty good player. Estrella, who was hurt with the foot problem, so he was really our enforcer in the middle. We didn't have him all year, which was a real problem. It creates issues as far as when you get somebody big in there, they can just push you around. Now with having 2 big-time guys in there, that won't be a problem. Of course, you got Okpara, who does a great job playing defense and blocking shots, but, you know, he's not a wide guy. He's just really tall. And then our guard, Boswell. So based on typical numbers, we'd have 4 spots available, but based on what happens with the NCAA, either today or really probably the coming week, we'll have 6 spots available. Now, I don't know if Barnes would fill that entire roster, but he might. But we're going to talk about the downside of this NCAA negotiated settlement right now. And this is a live update that's on USA Today. And the judge that's going to decide is this Claudia Wilkin. And we've talked a lot about this. It's that big House versus NCAA. And of course, you already know if you watch this channel, $21.5 million would be available every year to pay out. That's the negotiated settlement towards players. That includes football, basketball, etc. And most of it would go football based on analytics that they put together. Now, Title IX is going to object, of course, because they want the money split more fairly with female athletes.
You're out of order! You're out of order! The whole trial is out of order! They're out of order!
And that'll end up in lawsuit after lawsuit over time. And what they're trying to do is eliminate the typical scholarship limit and go to a roster number. Now that sounds great because you'd go from 85 players to 105 in football. They could all be on scholarship, or they could at least offer that many if they chose to. However, a lot of teams have 120 players because they have a ton of walk-ons. And if you have a roster limit of 105, 120, that's 15 guys going to be thrown off the team. So that is not sitting well, and we're getting to the cutting time. And obviously there's going to be a lot of consternation about that. And the judge spoke to this. And here she says, skepticism about roster limits. And as the attorney was talking about it in favor of the settlement, the judge cut him off and said, that's small comfort to the ones who don't get the roster spot or the scholarship. So she's not happy about players being thrown off the team. She also said a particular concern for athletes who made school choices based on having a roster spot available to them and then being told unceremoniously they wouldn't have one. In other words, getting thrown off the team. So the judge is talking about a phase-in period for roster limits. So they may work something out over the next year or two or three to where you can have more than 105, for example, but that number comes down to 105 over a period of time, which sounds like what the judge is wanting to do. We'll see how that plays out. But I thought that was super interesting because that's the biggest downfall that I see in this, other than if you're somebody that doesn't want anybody getting paid. And I know there are folks out there that are old school. Look, we're well past that. That ship has sailed. Also, the judge said there would be no ruling today from the bench. He says that's not a surprise. In other words, we'll get it in a number of days because the judge is going to want to write out her decision, and it'll be page after page after page because they want, a lot of judges want people to understand their thinking. Also, the plaintiffs talked about a risk of no settlement, which would basically bankrupt the NCAA, and that would be very destructive for the athletes because if that happens, now the House and the Senate would have to step in and probably give immunity to the NCAA. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any college sports. It would all just implode. That's not going to happen. I'll go ahead and tell you, there's no senator or House member on the planet that wants that to happen. You're talking about some unhappy people. Imagine not having a football season next year in the state of Tennessee.
Our pets' heads are falling off! Okay, just calm down.
Or how about Georgia? So yeah, they would have to step in. So they might as well settle it because you don't, look, if you're a player, you don't want the NCAA getting immunity because then they could do whatever, they could go back to the way it is. So that's a problem. And here it talks about Ted Cruz has gone beyond a discussion draft, that he would have a draft of a bill that would give limited protections for the schools. There's also several people objecting to the settlement as individuals, which I don't know how much credibility the judge will give on that, but she is listening to them. And that'll be part of today's settlement discussions or hearing. So anyway, it sounds like we won't be getting an answer today, but I would think over the coming days, because look, everybody wants to know. So this judge is going to be under intense pressure to make a decision one way or the other. And I think that she'll agree with the settlement. Maybe there'll be some tweaks to it, but given the circumstances, it almost has to go through. If not, you're going to see some craziness. Anyway, did want to give you an update on that, and I hate to see those walk-on guys. Look, those are the guys that really want to be on the team. They're not there for money. They get up at 5 in the morning and get out there and practice for free. I mean, these are guys that are desperate to play football, and they don't give a crap. They don't even want a scholarship. So seeing those guys thrown off would suck. So anyway, did want to give you an update on all this, the Tennessee roster situation, and then, of course, the NCAA settlement discussions. And if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Let's me know continue to cover all these big college sports stories. If you've not subscribed, boom, boom, boom. Hit that little button right there. It won't cost you a dime. Help you get my videos. And right over here is the most recent video YouTube thinks you'll enjoy based on your viewing history. And we'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.
Well, come to see a fat old man sometime. Yeah!